Welcome into College Football Breakdown with Joe Lisi. Find him on Twitter at @GoForThe2. Joe, welcome in. How you doing today, buddy?
Doing well, Drew. This is championship weekend. We find out who the top 4 teams will be for the college football playoff. Doesn't get better than this.
Absolutely. We're really interested to hear your opinion on these 4 games. Joe is sitting at 35-23-1 on the season. That's all against the spread. You can go back, check the videos. This man has been good, knows his stuff in college football. Joe, let's start off 12:30 Eastern time kick here. Saturday, you can watch this one on Fox. We got TCU versus Oklahoma, rematch in the Big 12 for the Big 12 championship game. 63.5 the total. The Sooners laying 7 pretty much across the board on SBR odds right now. How you looking to bet this one?
Yeah, I really like TCU here in the rematch for a couple of factors. This is a TCU offense that's averaging 183 rushing yards on the ground. They're passing for 232 through the air with their quarterback, Kenny Hill, that came back from injury last week to complete 26 of 36 passes, 325 yards, and 3 touchdowns. The week off seemed to benefit Kenny Hill. Was he hurt in that first meeting against Oklahoma? And when I look at TCU's defense, they did record 8 total sacks in the 45-22 win over Baylor. This is a TCU defense that's still only allowing 90 rushing yards per game and 224 passing yards to opposing offenses, but they do have 40 total sacks. They're holding opposing offenses to 29% on third down conversions and are forcing turnovers this year at +6 in turnover margin. When you look at Oklahoma, what can you say but Baker Mayfield's lighting it up? He's completing 71% of his passes, 4,094 yards, 37 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. But I look at the Oklahoma defense as the matchup that you want to see play out on Saturday. This is an Oklahoma defense that's giving up 149 rushing yards per game and, more importantly, over 220 passing yards to opposing offenses. And the way West Virginia utilized the Wildcat formation in the second half of that game last week, I think is a critical factor for TCU in running the football this weekend with Kyle Hicks. They allowed 250 rushing yards to the Mountaineers. I like Gary Patterson in a rematch situation, his experience over head coach Lincoln Riley, and I'm calling for the upset. TCU 37, Oklahoma 33.
I like this one, Joe. I like your opinion. I agree with you. And for record-keeping purposes for Joe's record this year, he's on TCU +7. You can pretty much find it across the board right now. On to the 4 o'clock slate, Saturday. SEC Championship in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. We got Georgia versus Auburn, a rematch of the oldest rivalry in the South. 48 the total. You can find Auburn -2.5 at 5 dimes right now, -2 at Heritage. This one will be on CBS, 4 o'clock Eastern time. Joe, how you betting the SEC Championship?
I like Georgia here, but there's a lot of statistics. Let's jump right into it. Auburn's won the last 3 SEC championships, Drew, that they've played in by 22 points per game. The last Auburn loss in an SEC championship came in 2000 to the Florida Gators by a score of 28-6. When you look at Georgia overall, it is a rematch. They only rushed the football against Auburn for 46 yards in the first meeting, but this is a Georgia offense that seems to be clicking at just the right time. They put up 381 rushing yards against Kentucky. They followed that up last week with a road win over arch rival Georgia Tech. They pounded the rock for 247 yards on the ground. Over the last couple of games now, they do have 8 rushing touchdowns, but there's more reasons why I like Georgia in this matchup. First of all, they're 5-1 on the road this year, so they've been battle-tested. Their only road loss did come on the Plains in Auburn. But you look at rematch situations for Kirby Smart from 2016. Georgia lost 5 games last year to Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Florida, Georgia Tech, and Vanderbilt. You look at the rematch situations this year by Georgia, they won all 4 of those games by a combined score of 166-28 or 34.5 points per game. I think Jake Fromm could be aggressive, working off of play action on first and second down. He's completing 62% of his passes, 1,990 yards, 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. I look for them to be very aggressive early on to open up the rushing attack for Sony Michel and Nick Chubb. And more importantly, it is the secondary of Georgia, only giving up 159 passing yards per game. I like that matchup going up against Jarrett Stidham. Now, Auburn's been one of the hottest teams in the nation this year. They're rushing for 237 yards on the ground, passing for 232 through the air with Jarrett Stidham. And you look at Kerryon Johnson, that leads that team with over 1,200 rushing yards and 17 rushing touchdowns. But there's a couple of causes of concern why I don't favor Georgia in this matchup. One, over the last 3 weeks, they really had to utilize a lot of emotion, and from a game plan perspective, they had to throw the kitchen sink at Georgia and Alabama just to win those ball games. I think that favors Kirby Smart in the rematch. And secondly, you look at Auburn's front seven that's giving up 125 rushing yards per game. They allowed 211 to Alabama last week. Are they worn out on this matchup on a neutral field site going up against Georgia? To me, that's the difference. I think Georgia is the fresher team. I think they win this ball game convincingly by 13 points or more over the Auburn Tigers.
All right, so Joe taking the Dogs there in Atlanta, and you can find, I guess he'll take them record-keeping purposes, plus 2.5 at 5 dimes. Joe on UGA on Saturday. On to the night slate. We got one in the Mountain West here, 7:45 Eastern kick on ESPN. Fresno State versus Boise State, 323, 324, the rotation number on SBR odds right now. 51 the total. You can find it 8.5 pretty much across the board. If you're looking to bet Fresno State, the underdogs here, you can get +9 at the Greek. So Joe, which way are you looking to bet this rematch?
Well, it is a rematch that Fresno State won 28-17 last week, and they were able to pass the football against Boise State, 332 yards through the air with their quarterback, Marcus McMaryion. I think this game favors Fresno State, even though it is on the road in Boise. A couple of factors why I like Fresno State in this matchup. Offensive line is playing very well. They've only allowed 7 total sacks on the year. You look at this Fresno State offense led by Marcus McMaryion. He's completing 62% of his passes, 2,212 passing yards, 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Offensive line has played very well, and they've had a balanced offense throughout the year. You look at their defense as well, especially in run support. They're only allowing 117 rushing yards on the ground. They're +9 in turnover margin, and they're very solid in third down defense. They go on the road to face a Boise State team that realistically could not generate a pass rush last week against Fresno State. They allowed Marcus McMaryion to pick apart their secondary. They could not generate a sack on the year. And you look at over the last 3 games by Boise State, they're allowing opposing offenses to convert 51% on third down conversions. To me, that's the difference in this matchup. I think Fresno State just matches up very well against the Boise State Broncos. Boise State might win this game, but Fresno State does cover the 9.5 number in this matchup.
All right, Joe, so we can give you Fresno State +9 at the Greek right now. And just tad bit later, 8 p.m. Eastern kickoff on ABC. We got 325, 326 Miami versus Clemson. This one in Charlotte, 46.5 the total. Looks like Clemson is laying pretty much 9.5 across the board. How you looking to bet the ACC championship, Joe?
Yeah, I really like the defending national champion Clemson Tigers. I know Miami has the turnover chain, but you look at Miami's offense right now, a couple of factors why I like Clemson in this matchup. You look at the Hurricanes over the last couple of games, they're only rushing the football for 96.5 rushing yards on the ground in back-to-back games against Pittsburgh and Virginia. They're an offense that's rushing for 166 yards per game and passing for right in the area of about 250 yards through the air with their quarterback, Malik Rozier, that does have 55% completion percentage, 2,798 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. But I look at this being able, Miami needs to run the football. I don't like the way the offensive line is playing. You look at their defense overall. I said it, they're creating turnovers, plus 17 in turnover margin, and they do have 39 total sacks. But if you look at Miami's body of work on the road or on a neutral field site this year, they're 3-1 overall against opponents with a combined overall record of 19-28 or 404 winning percentage. They beat Duke, they beat Florida State, and they beat North Carolina while losing to Pittsburgh last week. Those 3 victories came by a combined total of 11.3 points per game. When you look at my Clemson's body of work, this is a Clemson team that's 4-1 on the road. They knocked off Louisville, they knocked off Virginia Tech, they knocked off NC State, and they knocked off South Carolina. Those teams are a combined 33-15 overall, or a 687 winning percentage. They won those ball games by 17.7 points per game. This is a Clemson offense that is balanced. They're rushing and passing for over 200 yards with their quarterback, Kelly Bryant, that has completed 66% of his passes, 2,454 yards, 12 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. And I look at Clemson's defense as being the difference in this matchup. They're holding opposing offenses to 113 rushing yards on the ground. They're giving up 169 yards through the air, but they do have the best defensive line in the country, led by Christian Wilkins and Dexter Lawrence, that does have 40 total sacks on the year. And the most important statistic is that Clemson is only allowing 28% to opposing offenses on third down. That still is the Achilles heel of the Miami offense entering this matchup. Miami is only converting 30% on third down conversions. Over the last 4 games, it's only 29%. I think Clemson forces the Hurricanes into third down and long situations. That'll allow them to dial up blitz packages. And you look at Clemson overall as well, on the road or on a neutral field site, they're +6 in turnover margin. Clemson wins this game in convincing fashion, 37-20 over the Hurricanes Saturday night.
All right, Joe. So you're on 3 underdogs, 1 favorite. We got Saturday night. You got Clemson -9.5. You got Fresno State +9. During the day, you got UGA +2.5 and TCU +7. Joe, best of luck this weekend. But before we let you go, want to hear your thoughts on your final college football playoff. Who makes it, in your opinion?
Well, I think Clemson will be there. I think Georgia will be there. I think when you look at it overall, I think the last 2 teams, I'm picking Alabama to sneak in because I think Ohio State will knock off Wisconsin. And I think somehow, some way, if Ohio State knocks off Wisconsin, they'll find themselves in the college football playoff. It's in a very intriguing matchup, to say the least. But the 2 teams that I am very confident about in being there in the end are Georgia and Clemson. Those are my 2 better plays for the college football weekend this Saturday.
Okay, so yeah, you got Georgia winning in the SEC championship game, kind of the play-in game there. Also Clemson over Miami, so those 2 slots. And you think Bama and Ohio State move up and go to the playoff with Oklahoma losing? I'm trying to think of another scenario of another team that can make it with all these losses happening above. Is there another team you can think of?
Right now, the only teams ahead of Alabama and Ohio State right now, are Miami, Georgia. But if Georgia wins like I think they do over Auburn, there's no way Auburn, being a 3-loss team, could make the college football playoff, in my opinion. Could Wisconsin still sneak in there, depending on how bad Ohio State beats them? If Ohio State wins by 3 points, can you make the argument for a 12-1 Wisconsin team still being there? It's really going to be an interesting scenario, depending upon the margin of victories by some of these teams. I think that's what we have to see play out, because in the end, the team that's really sitting on the outside looking in, that just has to wait and see, is the Alabama Crimson Tide. They don't control their own destiny. They've made the college football playoff the last 3 years. We'll see how it plays out for Nick Saban and the crew.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, Joe. To have 2 SEC teams and no Pac-12 team and also no Big 12 team. So I don't know if money-wise that's too smart for college football. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, well, at the end of the day, though, Drew, it is about which teams are, the best four teams at the end. I think if Georgia knocks off Auburn in a rematch type of situation, they would avenge that late season loss to the Tigers 40-17. And when you look at Clemson overall, I mean, they're a 4-1 team on the road. They're the defending national champions, and they lost a 3-point game in the Carrier Dome where they lost their quarterback, Kelly Bryant. So, again, I think those two teams are solidified, Georgia and Clemson, should they win their championship games. I think when you look at Oklahoma overall, how can you make the argument for Oklahoma if they lose this game to TCU? They'd be a 2-loss team. Can you make the argument for TCU knocking off Oklahoma? I'm not so sure about that either. They did lose to Iowa State in Ames 14-7, and they got blown out in Norman, both road games. I could see the Big 12 being on the outside looking in, and the Pac-12, in my opinion, has absolutely no chance to make the college football playoff. The only teams that would really benefit from that type of scenario would be Alabama and Ohio State should the Buckeyes knock off the Wisconsin Badgers.
All right, Joe. Well, good stuff, man. Make sure to follow Joe on Twitter at @GoForThe2, and we will be back next week with the Bowl Preview Show. Joe Lisi will be a part of it, so stay tuned on SBR Picks.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to our channel. Now, we've put a lot of work into producing all these free videos, so please help us out and keep all our content free for you forever by simply liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Now, not to mention, a visit to our industry-leading website will warm the hearts of all our SBR employees, especially myself. Now, the links are over there to the left, so do check those out. Thanks for watching.